Scripture reading this morning will come from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, 19 through 27. For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win the more. And to the Jews I become as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without the law, as without the law, not being without the law toward God, but under law towards Christ, that I might win those who are without the law. To the weak I become as a weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be partaker of it with you. Do you not know that those who run in a race run, but one receives the prize, run in such a way to obtain it? And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it to subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified.
Thank you, Brother Eric. Appreciate you reading for me this morning. And welcome to everyone. Good to see everyone here today. Very thankful for another opportunity to share in the Word with you this day. Our lesson this morning is going to come from a statement here that Paul makes in verse 26. He says, "Thus I fight. Thus I fight." And it's based off of this very verse here, and this is going to be the basis of our lesson this morning. And when you think about a lot of things that people fight through, they fight on. There was a little video that was sent to me recently. It was about a track athlete. Her name was Heather Dorniden. I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She was in a race with three other people, so there was four of them running a 600-meter dash, basically. And in the last lap, at the beginning of the last lap, she was brutally slammed to the ground due to the fact that one of the other runners' feet tripped her up. And that completely devastated her chances of winning. Now, she was favored to win this race, but it looked like that was going to be lost forever. So her teammate was another one of the athletes, and so she was able to position herself in first place, and maybe she could win the crown, as it were. But actually, just as that happened, something remarkable happened. Heather actually got up, and then she started running, and she ran as fast and as hard as she could. And when there was about 2/3 of the lap left to the finish line, she actually overtook the third-place runner. By the time she got to the last turn, she actually overtook the second place. And as it was coming into the home stretch with only a few yards left, she actually ran so fast and so hard, and she leaned forward just in time to break the tape at the finish line and won in first place. Never lose hope, never give up is kind of the idea of that. And I thought, man, what a gutsy effort that was. That's crazy, gutsy effort, you know. But there are many types of kinds of gutsy efforts, I think, that people display in our world around us. They're equally inspiring. I mean, there's probably people that you may have no idea in your circle of life who also are in continuous pain. They might be facing seemingly insurmountable odds. Perhaps it's even heartbreaking challenges. It might be someone you don't even know about that goes to bed every night feeling defeated, crying themselves to sleep, only to get up the very next day and to, pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and to fight on another day. Some people truly possess, I think, a never give up, never say die attitude. And when you think about it, isn't that really the battle cry of our entire life? Shouldn't our entire life be that us? I might be too lazy to finish that race. I'm thinking, well, fourth place isn't bad after all. I just won't tell anybody there was four of us in the race, right? They might assume that there might have been 20 of them. I came in fourth, right? It might not be that I'd even succeed, but why wouldn't I try? How about you? The race becomes a metaphor, you see. In our life, there are many things that we have to face, many struggles, many battles, and we have to fight. And we should be familiar with the fighting spiritual battles. We're reminded by the Apostle Paul in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places," or the heavenly, more to the point. There were places as italicized, but heavenly. We fight against this in the church. We fight of this in our lives. Or 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 18. This charge I commit to you, son Timothy, according to the prophecies previously made concerning you, that by them you may wage the good warfare. As he goes on to say in chapter 6 of this same book or this writing, this letter. And in verse 12, fight the good fight of faith, lay hold on eternal life, to which you were also called, and have confessed the good confession in the presence of many witnesses. There's a lot of things that we have to fight. We fight our spiritual battles. Sometimes the things that we fight are even specified, like in Jude verse 3. Beloved, while I was very diligent to write to you concerning our common salvation, I found it necessary to write to you, exhorting you to contend earnestly or fight earnestly for the faith which was once delivered to the saints. There's a lot of things that we are expected to fight at or fight with. But if you think about it, it's applied across the board in every aspect of our lives. There's something that we need to fight for every day. And it might be different amongst us. It might be some of the things I'm going to throw up on this chart might be things that you're fighting already so well in, but there's other areas that you need to work on. There's just a lot of things. Everything you look at in life that's noble and pure and is something that God is endowed upon us is something worth fighting for. Think about that. You fight for your family, all right? You struggling there? Or at the very least, even if you're not struggling there, fight for your family in the sense that this our culture and time there's an attack on the nuclear family. Fight for that. Fight for what's right. Man is husband, woman, female is the wife. And from that procreation, from that come children. Fight for that. Okay? Fight for the truth of that. Don't get a fist fight over it, but stand for what's right. Okay? Fight for it if you have an issue in the home. Fight it. Fight for that family. Fight for the joy of being on top of this and defeating. Fight for the Lord's church and the integrity of it. Fight for the integrity of the gospel. Contend earnestly for the faith. Fight for your health. I'm doing that right now, okay? I have been too long, I've been overweight forever, and I'm just trying my best. I've lost about 15 pounds, and I'm not going to take no for an answer anymore. All right, let's fight for our health. God gave us, He gave you your body, right? And your body is a temple in which you live. And it dawns on me that I need to be a faithful steward to what God has given me. How about you? All right? Fight for your health, even if the odds are against you. Even if you're already behind the 8 ball and you have some serious issues, fight for whatever is remaining. Isn't that the message to the church at Sardis in Revelation chapter 3? Strengthen the things which remain. Whatever you got left, strengthen that. Fight for that. Fight for your personal faith. Okay? I'm talking in Bible class this morning about many are called, few are chosen, and the last will be first, the first will be last, and how many will be trying to press into the kingdom of heaven, but many of them are not going to be able, in spite of their striving, not going to be able to make it through. And it's not because there's not enough room in heaven. And it's not because God isn't patient enough to let us get through the small door and one at a time file through, as you might picture it. The failure is never because God gave up on you. It's because you gave up on God. And you need to fight for your personal faith. Don't let anything or anyone stand between you and God. Anything that comes between you and God is your God. You understand that? We need to fight for that every day. As soon as your feet hit the floor, you go into prayer mode and you immediately begin to talk about this day with God. Plan this day with your God. Fight for, in that sense, all of this together. Fight for your salvation, ladies and gentlemen. Fight for that. You know, Paul says work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. It's the same kind of concept. Every day. Every day is another day closer to our salvation, Paul says. We're much closer than when we first believed, is what he said to a congregation once upon a time. And there was a context that's worthy of looking at sometime. I just want to borrow from what he says there to let you know that there is that day coming. At the very least, our last day is coming. And we need to work and fight now in order to obtain the crown in the end. Okay? Keep that thought in mind. Because in some level, in some way, shape, or form, we do have to go through a kind of crucible, if you will. You know, life is hard. There's a lot of things that are hard. Life shouldn't be easy. If life were nothing but easy, this would be heaven, wouldn't it? There's nothing that reminds us that this world is not our home more than the sufferings we go through. Whether it's something that you're in pain with or something that you're having to endure, some fear that you're grappling with, standing by the graveside of a friend or loved one, all of these things remind us this world is not our home. We're just passing through, as Peter would say, and we sing about that, don't we? And we need to fight for our salvation. I'm going to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. There are times in which we do that, and especially if you keep falling down. When you keep falling down, and sometimes we do that. I have, and I got to tell you, the only thing to do is to get back up. And you got to keep fighting to do that. You have to get back up on your feet and do that every day. And it gets tiring and it's painful. Physically, you might be, I got plantar fasciitis, or I got a bad back or whatever. And you still got to get up and go to work, right? And you fight through the pain. Throw a little ibuprofen in there, hope that kicks in at some point. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, And you just do that. Why do you do that? It might be because you know your family depends on you. It might be you got to go get that paycheck in order for them to survive. And you just fight through that, right? Spiritually speaking, as we look at that as a metaphor, every day your soul depends on you getting up. Your soul depends on you getting right back up and fight on. Get back up on your feet and you take one more step toward that finish line. I told you many times in the past, and I'll say it again. We often picture this idea of being strong in Christ as we're just running across the finish line unscathed, right? We're more like that runner that I just spoke about, in which we've fallen flat on our face. And if you would ever watch that video, she's got like this blood on her face where she slammed on the ground. She did finally run back. Let me tell you something. In a pack of people, you may never come in number one. But with Jesus Christ, if you cross the finish line, you win. You understand that? And you may not be running across the finish line. You might be, as I've said before, dragging your bloody stumps across that finish line on your elbows. But crossing it is all that matters. And when you're on the other side of that, all that pain goes away. You have arrived. And you get the crown of life. So it is especially true. We have got to fight. Thus I fight. My salvation is too important. My soul is too important. So fight for your life. Fight for your soul. Fight for your salvation. Whatever this entails, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes there are times when we simply must say, maybe even scream into the darkness that's around us, to get behind me, Satan. A number of things cause us to stumble and fall. And sometimes it's just doubt. Sometimes it's just the voice of doubt. You can't make it. You can't do it. You're too tired. Why don't you rest for a while? God doesn't expect you to work out anything. After all, that's where the voice of false teaching comes in. All you have to do is believe. Just believe and you're in. Not realizing that what belief entails is obedience. Only obedient faith will save you. Not just faith, not the cognizance of the awareness of his existence. The fact of the matter is, we have to do. By faith, we do. We run this race. We fight this fight. Sometimes we fight together, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes we do. And sometimes we fight alone. I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. But before we fight, no matter who we fight, one thing's abundantly clear. You got to know your enemy. You have to know your enemy. Military personnel, the minds, the powers that be in military operations and war, they learn their enemies. To the best of their ability, they learn the strengths and the weaknesses of their enemy so they can best position themselves to win the battle. When they know that there's their front line of battle and they are reinforced there, and they're reinforced on this side and this side, but there's one little crevice here, there's one soft underbelly here, and we're going to exploit that because that's our way inside, and we're going to fight them from the inside. We're going to breach their perimeter, and we're going to fight and win this thing. We got to know our enemy. Now, our enemy obviously is Satan, right? We know how he works. We know that he's a great deceiver. We know he's a liar and the father of lies. And he's a murderer from the beginning in the sense that he causes us to die through our belief in his lies, and we follow the wrong gospel sometimes or even just give up. All those things that he says are lies. Now, you got to know what his strengths are. But does Satan really have a weakness? It depends on how you look at it, I guess. But ultimately, the most important thing really to look at here when you're looking at your enemy, it's especially true when you want to come to know your enemy that you can win today, is that you know the enemy that is you. You look in the mirror, and that guy looking back, that man or woman looking back, you know them. You know them because they're the ones keeping you down when you're down. Yes, Satan is the one that's causing the influence of trying to pull us down. God is providing the influence to try to pull us up and the strength that can come with that. The only thing that stands in the way of our success ultimately is you. and me. You look in the mirror. The person you're looking at, that's your enemy sometimes. And you got to know your enemy. What I mean by that is know your own strengths and weaknesses. And no one knows that better besides God than you. You know very well the things that do not adversely affect you whatsoever and the things that are your Achilles heel, as they say. You know very well what triggers you have. You know very well the things that will cause you to fall and you get too close to the fire and then you get burned and then you get mad at yourself. You know, Jason asked in Bible class, have you ever been so ashamed that you got mad? And I didn't say it, but I thought to myself, yeah, I have. I've been mad at me plenty of times. So ashamed that I was so angry with myself. You ever be like that? We got to understand something. There was wisdom in Jesus' words in Matthew 5 and verses 29 and 30. It says, if your right eye causes you to sin, to pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Likewise, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Jesus certainly is not talking about self-mutilation. If for no other reason, I'll tell you this. You can just as easily sin with your left eye and your left hand. That wasn't the point. What he was saying is there are going to be some things you have to cut out of your life that will be so painful and so uncomfortable and put you at maybe some kind of disadvantage in some ways. It might be less easy to get through life with only having one eye and only one hand. So I switch, what if my right hand's my dominant hand, which it is. But if you had to give up something that you can't get back, once it's plucked out and cut off and cast away, it's gone forever. There is going to be pain involved in that. But what is necessary is that you would do that to the saving of the body. If you have gangrene in your leg and it's working its way up and it's going to surge through your system and it's going to attach itself to your vital organs, you're going to die. The only way to save the body sometimes is to cut off that limb. Okay? To save the body, you cut off the limb. The same idea is seen in the church with church discipline. In order for the cancer of sin not to invade and permeate the entire group, sometimes you have to cut people loose because they are an influence of evil that will cause the whole church to fall. And you have to cut them loose to save the body. Do you understand that? That's a thus saith the Lord. And when we look at those two ideas and apply it to you and apply it to Jesus' statement here, and you realize that sometimes you are your own worst enemy. I'm my own worst enemy. So I've got to rally. I've got to stand and I've got to fight. I've got to defeat me first. You remember a few weeks ago, I gave a sermon on the Star Spangled Banner. It was, Say Can You See was the title. Remember that? And I mentioned Old Glory. I said Old Glory, the flag was a rallying point at times in battles in which outnumbered American military men and women were surrounded on all sides. It seemed like all hope was lost, and they would look up and they would see Old Glory flying, and she was still flying. And that was the point for them in which they fought on. It just gave them a new sense of purpose and a new sense of determination to fight on and maybe win. Or even if it was required to fight to the death. But they were not going to give up. And I said in that sermon, I mentioned the banner of the cross, how to us, to use that flag as a metaphor for us, that the banner of the cross, as we sing about it, we sang it that day, the banner of the cross is our rallying point. When I need my strength and realize I got to get back up on my feet, I need to look at that cross and realize this is why Jesus died. He died for this kind of thing. But here's the thing that I think of then. He didn't die just so I can keep messing up. We need a rallying point. We need a rallying point, and it's not just Jesus himself. It is actually the accomplishment of the cross. And that is our rallying point. I'd like to have you go back in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 17 and verses 8 through 13. I want to work out this idea together of having the rallying point of the cross. Exodus chapter 17, verses 8 through 13. It says here, now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose us some men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I'll stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did so, as Moses said to him, and fought with Amalek. And Moses and Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, and his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua, in other words, so in this way, or in this manner, Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. The picture we see is this. You have Moses, who was in the middle, and Aaron and Hur were on either side of them. I was reading through this one day. I don't know if I've ever heard a sermon on this or anybody make this point before. Maybe they did. I just don't remember it. But I do know when I was reading through this the other day, how it struck me that, well, Jesus actually was between two people too, on a hill. Yeah, and it says specifically in the text there that Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up on a hill where they could be seen. And Golgotha, Calvary, is described by historians as a place that's a scalp of a hill outside of the city walls of Jerusalem. And Aaron and Hur had to hold up Moses' arms because his arms grew heavy and weary. And as long as his arms were held up, the people of God prevailed over their enemy. And it dawned on me as I looked at that just the pictorial image stuck out in my mind that similarly, almost as a prototype of Jesus on the cross, Jesus' arms were likewise held up too, but not by men, but by the nails of sin and condemnation. And then that got me to thinking. Isn't that interesting? It's almost as if God were making absolute sure that Jesus' arms could not fall. And thus we can likewise prevail over our enemies by what he accomplished here. He died that way. He died in that position. Okay? And we can prevail too. There is no reason not to gain a victory because Jesus is already victorious. We have gained a victory in Christ, and we can be victorious and prevail over our enemy too. Not just Satan, but everything that comes with Satan. Sin, the temptation that leads into that, death, both physical and spiritual, by the way. That's very important for us to understand that. And sometimes I think we feel alone in our fight, even though we know this of Jesus and what he accomplished on the cross. It's worth fighting for because he's already victorious. All we need to do is cross that finish line, no matter, come what may. But we feel outnumbered a lot. That's part of the thing. Yeah, I can pump you up today, and you go out into the world, and then there's all these things, not even people sometimes. The circumstances of our lives sometimes are so oppressive, and they just smother us, and they drown us, and they press us down. And sometimes you just don't know from day to day if I can just, how much more can I take? Sometimes it's downright scary. There's a story in 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6, I'd like to read with you in the Bible here. Second Kings in chapter 6. And the story is about Elisha and the experience that he had, beginning in verse 8. I'd like to read with you down through verse 18. Now it says, Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he took counsel with his servants, saying, My camp will be in such and such a place. And the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, Beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. Then the king of Israel sent someone to the place of which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, and he was watching there, not just once or twice. Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was greatly troubled by this thing, and he called his servants and said to them, Will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? And one of his servants said, None, my lord, O king. But Elisha the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you spoke in your bedroom. So he said, Go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. And it was told him, saying, Surely he is in Dothan. Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? Ladies and gentlemen, these men were hemmed in. They were completely surrounded by the enemy. So he answered, Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. what this physical world does not understand whenever you're the one that under attack, whatever it is. Might even be someone trying to hurt you. The power of evil seems to be so great, and it is. It's great. But greater than that is our God. They weren't alone. With one word, more than 12 legions of angels could come and bring Christ out of the calamity that we saw in the Garden of Gethsemane, but he did not bring him. But he could have. He said, I can. And I envisioned this at that time. They were poised. The heavenly host of, the angelic host of heaven, poised to fight for Elisha and poised to fight for Jesus just by saying that word. And that reminds me of some things that God always fights with His own, the righteous. He fights alongside us, okay? He may not be right there. He may not be right there with you, but He, in terms of Him actually having to do exactly this thing, face that person and say the words you're saying, but He is with you. If Christ is in you, the hope of glory, God is indeed with you. And it comes back to something I said a moment ago I wanted to come back to. Sometimes we fight together, sometimes we fight alone. Sometimes we fight together like we're just a few people, 2 or 3 or 4 people in a foxhole, right? And there's an army outside of that, and they're trying to hone in on us, they're trying to snipe us, and they're trying to drop some mortars on us, and we're fighting together side by side. Whether we live or not will be determined by the outcome of that battle in the physical realm. Whether we win or not in the spiritual realm is determined by how faithful we are to Christ. Because if we're strong with the Lord, He's strong with us. Sometimes our battles are one-on-one. It's more like maybe a pugilist, a boxer in the prize fight. And, I got to go out there and face that alone. I mean, you're with me. You're in my corner. That's where that expression comes from, by the way. So, hey, I got your back. I'm in your corner. That expression comes from the boxing world. And there's the 4 corners of the ring. And then one corner is one guy, and his team is his coach, if you will, his trainer. Might be a couple other guys. Somebody holding a spit bucket. That is not a job I'd ever want. And all they can do, because they can't fight this fight for him. You got to go out there, Rocky. You got to go take him down. You're the one that has to go out there. You alone go out there in that ring. You are taking all the hits. You're the one that's getting knocked down. You're the one landing the punches too. And all they can do is to cheer from you from that corner. And then eventually when the bell rings and the guy comes back and they kind of wipe you down and they put the little Vaseline under your eyes so when you get punched that your skin doesn't break and you're all beaten up and swollen and everything. And they just pat you on the back and come on now, we're believing you, give it, and send them right back out there. Sometimes that's the way it is with us. Sometimes I have to fight alone, and all you can do is to encourage me. I think a lot of people who have cancer that way. We don't all have cancer side by side. And some of the other things that you might have, whether it's a health issue or financial issues or family issues or whatever that may be, or maybe you live in a country in which your nation's been toppled and you've been dragged off into captivity. A lot of those things we do side by side, but a lot of these fights, they're one-on-one. This is my fight, I have to fight. And I need you. That was Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. All He said to Peter, James, and John is, will you stay here and watch with me? Would you be in my corner? Okay? And they kept falling asleep on Him. And no doubt there's a story I'd like to get into. There's a context there that actually is pretty interesting about those 3 men in that moment. But Jesus had to fight that fight. He could have called the whole match off by calling more than 12 legions of angels. But He had to fight. He alone took the blows. He alone died on that cross. Sometimes that's just the way it is. But what I do know is because of what Jesus accomplished on that cross, there is absolutely nothing I cannot overcome. I mean, we often say, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. We say it all the time, don't we? How about if God ever told you, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Therefore, I may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. What shall I fear? Who can do anything against me? Why should I fear man? I have His help. That's found in Hebrews chapter 13, verses 5 and 6, by the way. He said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. So the Lord is my helper. I have no reason to fear. And what can man do to me was the last question that he asked in that. What can man do to me? Let me say this to you. It's scary to say, what can the devil do to me? On the one hand, what can he do? I've got Christ in my corner. But as soon as you say it, then you start getting scared because you're like, well, I don't want to end up being Job here. You know, God allowed Satan to torment Job. Lesser men would have never recovered from that. Job went through a crucible, didn't he? Well, we may never go through the same level or depth or length of crucible that other people like Job had, but we do have to go through one because life's not supposed to be all easy. Yeah, there's times in which things have to burn out the impurities in our lives so that we can come out on the other side as pure gold before God. And I'll tell you something, we have to have a particular attitude when we're fighting against the devil, fighting against Satan and all of those things that try to keep us down. You have to fight against yourself sometimes. You have to absolutely get back up on your feet. I like this one statement here. Growing up, I used to watch a lot of Clint Eastwood movies. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Westerns. And there's one called The Outlaw Josie Wales. I think I've shared maybe this little storyline with you before, but it was near the end of the movie, and there was this house in Texas that this widow's son had built back in the day, and had the windows and doors had open crosses in it. It just looked like a cross, and that was where you'd stick your rifle out, and you could aim it right and left or up and down and have a chance of defending that house. And so he was giving them instruction. He was telling them the night before the apparent battle, or what they thought was going to be a battle against the Comanches. He was giving them instruction. All right, you stand here, Granny, you stand by the fireplace and keep that iron hot. If somebody sings out, gets shot, you sing out, and Granny will slap that iron on there to stop the bleeding. And he's just giving them all this instruction. Here's what you do with the rifle, blah, blah, blah. And finally, he turns around to them and says, this is the last little bit of inspiration here. He says, now remember, when things look bad and looks like you're not going to make it, then you got to get mean. I mean, plumb mad dog mean. Because if you lose your head and give up, you neither live nor win. That's just the way it is. That is the most profound statement I think I've ever heard on the idea that you just might lose. But in the face of that, you dig deep. And you got to get mean. And I mean plumb mad dog mean. This is teeth gritting time to fight. You fight to the very last breath for Christ. You fight to the very last breath for the integrity of your own soul. You fight to the very last breath of your salvation. We read about in Revelation chapter 20, around verse 10 or so, it talks about this idea that the world will be so bad after Satan's let off the chain, that 1,000-year business, and that he's going to go out and deceive the nations again. And that there's going to be so much evil in the world that the armies against God are going to surround the encampment of the saints as if to eradicate them from the face of the earth. And that's when fire will come down from heaven and devour the adversaries. And heaven and hell time, and even Satan will be cast into hell at that moment. When you're surrounded on all sides, and it looks like that you're not going to make it, and you're struggling, you got to get mean. Not mean against God, not mean against your family, not mean against the church, not even mean against yourself. This is when you look Satan in the eye, and you grit your teeth. Plumb mad dog me. And you fight. You fight for your soul. Ed Milet, you've heard me mention him before. He's in all kinds of stuff. He's an entrepreneur. He's been in the financial business, enterprise and stuff like that. He's written some books. He's a motivational speaker too. And he talked about one time that his father had such an influence on him, as a lot of fathers do. And one thing his father said a lot throughout from his youth to the time that his father passed away was that he was, if something challenging would happen, he said that, I'm just going to try one more day. Or I'm not going to give up one more day. I'm just going to have it in my mind. I want to quit. This is just too much. But he just focused on tomorrow. And he says, I'm just not going to give up one more day. And so that inspired Ed Milet. And as Ed was getting into some of his enterprises, some of them were failing miserably. He talked to his father, and his father reminded him of that. He's like, Dad, I just feel like giving up. It seems like a senseless cause. I just can't seem to win. Always behind the eight ball. One step forward, 2 or 3 steps back every day. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, son. If you want to give up, you can. No shame. You've accomplished a lot. But why don't you try this? Just don't give up one more day. Just one more day. So that inspired Ed. Ed actually wrote a book called The Power of One More. You can actually find it now on Amazon or wherever. The Power of One More. It's all based on that whole thing. But he said this one thing, and I heard him watched him in a speech one time. And this is what he said with reflection to how hard things can get. By the way, I guess, yeah, here we go. He says, so many times I wanted to quit. Just don't quit for one more day. When I want to quit, I just won't quit for one more day. And that's what I would encourage you to do. Things do seem to get really hard and they press down upon us. And the idea here is that you put in one more day. Isn't our our lives pretty much one day at a time? Do we sing a song that's like that? You know, kind of like one step at a time to your Savior. One day at a time is the idea. I can't do anything about next week, but what I can do is something about today, and I can plan for tomorrow. Can't do anything about that until tomorrow comes, and now it's today. I just won't quit one more day with my salvation. Whenever you feel weak and you feel like everything's against you and you feel like you're friendless and you feel like that things are so hard, just don't quit one more day. Just ask one more day. And every day you look in the mirror and say that to yourself. Just don't quit one more day. But what if things don't work out the way you want them to or you need them to? You see, that's the next question. Okay, I'll fight the fight, but I anticipate to win. Well, understand that in Christ, in salvation, you do that, you will win, period. But what about other things that sound sort of below that, you know? What about that? What if you don't win your children back to Christ? What if you don't accomplish things that are really, really important to you or maybe to your family or whatever? What if there's some things that just don't work out? What if it's your health we're talking about? And I prayed with the faith that moves mountains. And Jesus said, if you pray in my name, it'll be done for you. But it didn't. And then you're scratching your head and troubled as to why that is. Didn't Jesus promise that? Or the same Jesus who promised that is the same inspiration that John wrote with in 1 John chapter 5 and around verse 14 and following. And he talks about when we lay the petition before the Lord's feet, it's if the Lord wills, this will happen. It's an if the Lord wills policy. Whatever God deems best for you or the circumstances is how it's going to play out. And so sometimes you don't know how it's going to play out, and sometimes it can be troubling to you because you're not sure about it. And I'm reminded about the story in Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3 and verses 14 through 18. Nebuchadnezzar had erected this great big tall image of gold, this idol, 90 feet tall, 9 foot wide. And at certain times of the day, it's the sound of the playing of certain music, instruments. Everybody had to stop what they're doing and bow down and worship this God. But the Israelites in captivity could not do that. Not if they were to be right with God. You shall have no other gods before me is the first of the 10 Commandments. Well, they were squealed out. Somebody turned them into King Nebuchadnezzar. And it says in got it backwards here. And it says here in verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now, if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, or the lyre or lyre, I never remember how that's pronounced, and the psaltery and symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. And I don't remember when it was that it dawned on me that this the 3 words that start that last verse. But if not, because it dawns on you that they believed God would redeem them from the situation, save them. They said, but maybe that's not the Lord's will. Maybe I'm not going to be saved from the situation. But one thing I do know is that I will not bow down to your gold image. I will serve my God. Whether I live or I die, I live or die unto the Lord. And I will not. Well, interestingly, there was it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a musical group called Mercy Me. They're in what people commonly call the Christian pop music genre. And I don't know very much about that, but there was a song that I think years ago, actually, Beck had sent it to me, texted it to me. And I remembered it recently, and I thought, well, this is really a very powerful message. The song that they had come up with was Even If. It's titled Even If, and it's actually based on Daniel chapter 3 and verse 27. But if not, it's called Even If. And so I just put the lyrics up here for you to consider. And by the way, before I do this, you know how we sing Our God is an Awesome God, like in the Camp Noah or something like that? There are songs that end up in hymn books that actually started out like in this realm here. Sometimes you hear a song and you're like, man, I wish that was a hymn, because it's so profound. It's very profound, and it's very biblical. I'll be honest with you. I hope that this one, it might need just slightly reworded, but I hope that this becomes something that we can look at in a hymnal, or have it where you can read the music together and sing it together. To me, it's that powerful. They say sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some, and right now I'm losing bad. I've stood on the stage night after night reminding the broken it'll be all right, but right now I just can't. It's easy to sing when there's nothing to bring me down. But what will I say when I'm held to the flame like I am right now? I know you're able and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand, but even if you don't, my hope is you alone. They say it only takes a little faith to move a mountain. Well, good thing, a little faith is all I have right now. But God, when you choose to leave mountains unmovable, oh, give me the strength to be able to sing, it is well with my soul. I know you're able, and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand, but even if you don't, my hope is you alone. I know the sorrow and I know the hurt would all go away if you just say the word, but even if you don't, my hope is you alone. You've been faithful, you've been good all my days. Jesus, I will cling to you come what may. Then even if you don't, because I know you're able and I know you can. It goes on in the last bit of the song. I know you're able and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand, but even if you don't, my hope is you alone. And I know you're able and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand, but even if you don't, my hope is you alone. I know the sorrow and I know the hurt would all go away if you just say the word, but even if you don't, my hope is you alone. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Well, we sing a song similar to that, and it ends that same way. Powerful that is. It's not always going to be what we want. It may not be what we think we need. But God is faithful, and He is always going to be with you in your fight, and that's what we must do. And it reminds me, too, of this passage that Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8, verses 31 through 39. What then shall we say to these things? All those things that are against us and opposed to us, the things that beat us down, the things that try to draw us away from Christ. If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare His own Son, but delivered Him up for us all, how shall He not with Him also freely give us all things? Who is he who will bring a charge against God's elect after all? It is God Himself who justifies. Who is he who condemns? It is Christ who died and furthermore is risen, is even at the right hand of God, who also makes intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? For it is written, we are killed all day long for your sake. We are counted as sheep for the slaughter. That's a quote from the Old Testament, just bringing it to bear. Yet in all these things we were more than conquerors through Him who loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other created thing shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus. We fight on. That's exactly what we do. Thus I fight. When the way is dark and the shadows close in, we fight on. Even if naked and starving and in the cold and damp, we fight on. Should we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we fight on. When we're afraid and there are terrors in the way, we fight on. Even if surrounded on all sides, outnumbered, outmanned, we fight on. Even if we're abandoned and left defenseless and friendless, we fight on. When the vice of sin tries to hold us in its deadly grip, we fight on. When we are so broken and shattered because of our own transgressions, we fight on. Even if it seems all hope is lost, we fight on. When crushed under the weight of our adversary, adversity and despair, we fight on. Even if shrouded in the last hour of our death and to our very last breath, we fight on. This is a day-unto-day battle. And I'm going to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. It would be such a shame to get so close to the finish line. It'd be such a shame to get so close, having lived your life in Christ, only to give up or give in. Our salvation is worth the fight. I mentioned a moment ago this idea of a crucible. We may not all come out on the other side of the fire that we have to walk through. But one thing is abundantly clear. You can't get on the other side of that fire without going through that fire. And that's in every walk of life. I thought about that. First, I thought about that like in a business sense. I think all these people that took something and they made something big out of it, and it's like a household name now, some brand name. And if you look back through some of how these people went through that, they went through so many failures. Some of their product even, I don't know, I can't remember which one it is. Is it Heinz 57? Whatever it was, there's a product that the number on there was like, we finally got it. It was like 407 or something like that. It's like, how much did they have to go through? And they had to fight through all this, fight through all that, and looked like they're going to lose at any turn, one step forward, 3 steps back. And finally, as fate would have it and as the grace of God would have it, for whatever reason, they succeeded. Then now they become great. Okay? Let me tell you something. Not everybody that goes through that same turmoil is going to survive. The fire may actually consume them. But it's abundantly clear that every one of those people that you could look up, you can Google them, none of them got through that without going through a lot of difficulty to get there. As we look at our lives spiritually, there is no way that we're going to be able to enjoy the hope that is after the cross, our own cross, the cross we have to bear, that Jason pointed out in our script, our Bible study this morning, a cross we have to bear. The only way to enjoy the hope that is after that is to go through this fire that Jesus went through. You may or may not get out on the other side, but you can't get to the other side without going through the fire. Do you understand that? Can I get an amen? All right. There are passages of Scripture that tell us why this is important to us, because this is where our hope lies. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on, yes, says the Spirit, that they may finally rest from their labors, and that their works may follow them. And that's why we are encouraged to be faithful until death. And I will give you the crown of life, Jesus says in supposed to be chapter 2 and verse 10. Copy and paste error here. Or in Matthew chapter 10 and verse 22. He who endures to the end will be saved. We're told these things because that's what it takes. You cross that finish line, come what may, no matter if you have to drag yourself across. It is that important. The Apostle Paul lived this life, and this is where he ended up. He said, "For I'm already poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have fought the good fight, thus I fight. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Finally, there's laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me, and not to me only, but also to all who have loved his appearing." This is why it's so important. Thus we fight. We fight. We are a congregation of the Lord's saints in this place here, and we have each other to lean on. And this is exactly it. I have my own fight, but you're there with me. I'm there with you. Read Galatians 6 at your own leisure. You're going to see sometimes we bear one another's burdens, but we also have our own cross to bear. Thus we fight. Are you with me? If there's anyone here this morning who has not obeyed the gospel of Jesus Christ, I hope we've said something to inspire you to do that you can turn your life to Christ and be whole in Him. If you're not living as you should, I would especially hope that this type of lesson would stir your soul, and I want you to fight for your salvation. I want you to fight for your soul today. And if we can help you take that step toward Christ, and we can help you to stand on your feet through prayer and support, then we just ask that you do something about it today. If it's convenient for you, why don't you do that while we stand and while we sing? Please come.